What's up everyone and welcome to this tutorial. This time we are going to be going over 2D parallaxing, which is essentially taking a two-dimensional image and making all these little intricate parts move, making it look, more lifelike. So, by the end of it, you'll end up with something a little bit like this. Yeah, naturally you can go into it later on, add in some more things. You can put some radials down here for some lights, so on and so forth, add in some other lights. You can even make it 3D, use some cards, throw some lights in it, get some backdrops, so on and so forth. However, for right now, this is a pretty good way to start. So, with that being said, I'm going to drop us over into the large node graph workspace, because once you get to a graph similar to this size, it kind of gets to be a hassle, dragging it around and everything. So we're just going to start with it nice and big to begin with. Your folder where you have all of your images placed. So a little bit of a disclaimer for right here, a lot of the work for this kind of a thing will be done prior to actually compositing it in Photoshop. You're going to have to cut out all of your little pieces that you're going to use, save them separately, and then port them in using a read node. So an easier way of going in here, typing in a read node with tab and then finding the file, so on and so forth. You can just take all of them, select them, and drag and drop them right there. Bam, nice and easy. So this is gonna be our background here, this little read. But to start it off, we're gonna need to merge it first. So go ahead and just put a merge node on it. Now since this is going to be our background, you're actually going to want to pipe it into the B pipe. Easiest way to remember that is B is for background. Would you look at that? So come through here, find the one that you want, and begin. So we're going to take this one down here with the buildings that were down here in the bottom right hand corner, and we are going to put a pre-molt node on it. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the RGB itself and multiply it by the alpha. If you remember anything about your what are they called? The things that multiply is, you know what I'm talking about. You end up getting this kind of a thing. So it's going to take everything that isn't the RGB, which in a PNG, this case is the white, and it's going to change it and essentially just black it out. So it doesn't really exist anymore at this point, because it is now part of the alpha channel that can no longer be visible. So with that, we'll bring it over, and when you get this all made, this is the only thing that's going to show up. So right quick, if we just want to pop that over and see it, you can see down here in the viewer that, oh, look at that. Those buildings are now perfectly placed in front of our background. Beautiful. However, we're going to want those buildings to move at some point, right? So, why not add on a fantastic transform node? And I can't spell. Transform. All right. So, once you have your transform node made, piped in from the pre-molt node, you're going to come over here to the translate. And you see this little squiggly line here? That is your keyframing stuff. So you're going to, first of all, make sure that you're on the right frame. You can set your global frame range to be different by coming in here and just hitting S. And this brings up your project settings. Frame range 1 to 90. I like starting at 1 because zeros freak me out. So, once you have your transform node made here, double click it, bring it back up. You're going to want to right click here and set key at your first frame down here. Go to your last frame and drag it approximately where you want it to be by that point. So if we come down here, play that back, you can see it as it drops between those 2 points. Yay, transform nodes. So now that we have that made, we'll come down here, and if you want to, as you can see on our original ones, you can actually add a blur onto it just to give it that little bit more sense of realism. So if you put that on there, comes down here into the last part, you're going to want to keep it as a Gaussian filter. This is more of it's just a different algorithm of blur that mimics a typical camera blur. So just bump it up until you're comfortable with it. Usually, since this is going to be farther in the background, but it's going to be a larger object, you kind of want to keep it blurred, but not too much of a blur. 7.6 is pretty good for right now. Now, usually when you do all this type of compositing stuff, you want to keep as many straight lines with your pipes as you can, just so you can see everything making sense. Once you start getting, into crazy diagonals and things like that, it's not considered good practice, and it's also kind of just a pain to try to figure out where anything is. So, we're going to want to keep it like this, and after this merge node, you're going to want to add in another merge node. Again, remember the whole AB pipe, so switch that over to the B. Now, once you get this building done, you're going to need to do this same process for every single one of these. So I'm going to go through it, and I'll probably cut back to right after I've done this same process for all of these, so that, I don't bore you guys to death. Alright, so I figured I'd come back here and show you guys right before I add in, our good old Spidey. So, now that you can see with all of these pre-mult transforms and blurs added to it, you finally get this image down here of it looking all pretty and stuff. Since this bird is, farther in the back and it's actually being kind of highlighted by this right here, the big old moon, kind of want to blur him a little more. He's farther back, kind of makes more sense that way. The other birds, you can apply different blurs depending on where you want them situated. The ones farther back here, the smaller ones, I gave a bigger blur just to kind of give it a little bit more of a dimensionality, show that they're farther in the back. So, we got Spidey here. We're going to give him a pre-molt node, which again takes the alpha. And since, we'll view this right now, since this guy right here has RGB, everything like that, his own RGB values, along with a transparency in the background because he is a PNG file, Nuke has a finicky way of dealing with transparency. Instead of just being okay with it, you kind of have to make it into a quote-unquote alpha channel. So by using the pre-mult node, we're able to take in this alpha channel, which is the transparency, which is why the thumbnail looks really weird, because it's trying to read it, can't really do it. So the pre-mult node is giving us a better alpha channel. So in the alpha channel, if we were to come here and just look at an alpha channel like this is how it works. So where all of the color is in this case will be displayed, the black is what will not be displayed. This is dealing with the ones and zeros setting true and false, because that's what an alpha channel does. So whatever is red here will be visible, whatever is black will not be visible. And the reason why it's red is because Nuke kind of just drops it into the first available channel down here, which in this case is red. So that's why it gets displayed in red here. So we'll come back over. There we go. Alright. So we got Spidey poised and ready to go into it. We'll give him a transform node. And if you see like where he's pulling and whatnot, we could probably guess that he's gonna go that way. So something to keep in mind here is with transform nodes, if I were to open up all these different transform nodes, you can see them all down here in the viewer, which is where you can move them and manipulate them and whatnot. When this happens, it gets cluttered. You can end up moving some of your other transform nodes for your other read nodes, and you'll mess a lot of stuff up. So you're going to want to make sure that you close it out up here with the little X here, the remove panels, open up the transform you're going to be messing with. Again, make sure you're on the starting frame. Come down here, set key, go to your last frame, or wherever you want the motion to stop or switch. Kind of just move him where you want him to go. I'm kind of feeling if this is going to happen, he's going to kind of end up over here, because it's going to be a swinging motion, if you will. So we'll put him like right there. Play that back real fast. And his knee kind of gets cut off by the frame up here, but that's okay. So once we get Spidey set up here, we're gonna probably want to give him some blur as well, right? So instead of just slapping on a blur and making it constant the whole time, he's gonna be moving, right? And since he's closer to us, we want to give him some motion blur. So let's go in here and type in motion blur 2D, and that'll just set up how it's going to be moving. Since he's only a two-dimensional object in this frame, we aren't dealing with camera tracking and 3D objects yet. So we bring in this so that the next one knows what it's going to be dealing with, and that is a vector blur. So this vector blur, as you can see, gives us all of these different things. So if we come over here, you can see this was our original one. Well, we gave him some vector blur there. So in this one, all you're going to need to do is kind of just up the multiply. And what it'll do is that in the background, once he starts moving, it'll actually just end up applying some stuff to it. By stuff, I mean math. And it'll just give him his own motion blur. You do want to make sure that your UV channels are set to motion. Otherwise, it's just going to not really add anything. And you get a little bit of a blur on him there using multiply here. Your mix is essentially just how much of it is prevalent. There goes my computer screaming. So, we bring Spidey down here. We find our merge node, add in one more, and then go ahead and view that last merge node. So at this point, this tree looks a little bit better than that one. The reason why the original version that we ended up doing with a key light is a little worse, it'll actually kind of crash your computer if you're not doing it well enough or don't have a beefy enough rig for it. The reason why is because key light is actually very powerful and kind of power hungry when it comes to its calculations and whatnot. So this is a little bit better on your computer. Theoretically shouldn't kill it as fast as the other way. So once we're done there, we can come in here and admire our work. Look at that. So once this is all done, again, as I stated in the beginning, you can come in and kind of add in radials, put in some lights, maybe add some other things. A quick way of doing it in 3D is to set most of these as cards, so on and so forth, adding in lights, and you can get some shadows and stuff on the other ones, especially on this background here, and it'll kind of show up. The only issue is you may have to make sure that that doesn't get in there, and the shadow kind of makes sense. So, with all that being said, you can look at all these here. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure that your transform nodes aren't all open at the same time so you aren't messing things up. And be sure to use pre-mult nodes to make sure that your alpha channels actually work.